Okay, you ready?
I'm ready when you are.
All right. Can you please tell me your first and last name and where and when you were born?
Donald Dailey. I was born in Ringold County, Iowa.
When's your birth date?
11/25/21.
Okay. So you were born in 1921.
Right.
So you remember the Great Depression?
Yes, ma'am. I lived through the Great Depression. I sure did.
What was that like?
Well, we also not only had to, I think what we lived through has much to do with our lifestyle as our genes. And of course, living through the Depression with a large family, I have 5 older and 5 younger than myself. So I'm the middle one in a large family, and we lived on a farm until 1931, in which time we moved to Mount Ayr. My father said that he went broke in 31, starved out, went broke in 28, starved out in 31. So we lived on the regular farms that the people did in those days, and then had the chinch bugs and dry weather and dust storms where the dust blew in from Oklahoma, red dust in the air. Air conditioning was outside or windows open under a shade tree.
Do you remember what kind of things you had to do to help make ends meet, or did you have to work?
I've made my own way since I was 12 years old. And I've been very fortunate in my lifetime to always have a job. I delivered milk through grade school and high school around town here on the side of an automobile. And on farm work in the summertime, of course, and we worked 50 cents a day, but we didn't get paid for Sunday. But all we did on Sunday was maybe chores and stuff like that. Chinch bugs, grasshoppers in the 30s were prevalent. We didn't probably know we were poor until we found out, because everybody was about in the same way, where we had outhouses and took a bath in a tub behind the stove and carried water from pumps. And
wow, it's a different world now, isn't it?
It's an entirely different world now, and so air conditioning was a fan in your hand. I've worked on farms, of course, as I was telling you, and I can remember women being out when we were eating lunch, and they would have limbs off from trees to keep the flies away or keep a school while you were eating.
Wow. So, where did you go to school?
The first 3 years I went to country school. I was, of course, in the first, second, and third grade, and our teachers were girls that were fresh out of high school, took a course in elementary education, or that's not the right word, I can't think what course they took in school to teach, and I had 3 different teachers in my first 3 grades, and of course each one would get married the second year instead of coming back to teach. And then in the 4th grade I came to Mount Ayr and went to school here and went through high school here.
What year did you graduate high school?
1940.
So what did you do after high school then?
before, while I was in the summertime, part of the time, the last 2 years I was in high school, I worked at Pure Ice Company in Mount Ayr. We delivered ice all over Mount Ayr, and then all over the county, the different towns, and also 3, Clearfield and Blockton and Lamoni, which is outside the county. We delivered there. And then I worked in the Rexall drugstore for 2 years before going into the Navy.
Quick question about the ice. Why did you deliver ice?
Because that was the cooling. They put ice, of course, in boxes like refrigerators, and the housewife would put a card up in the window. If you wanted, like the top was what they wanted, 25 pounds, 50 pounds, 75 pounds, 100 pounds. Turn the card around and put up what they wanted. And we had ice chests that they put it in. And of course, it came to us in 300-pound cakes. And then, of course, the men that delivered, I worked actually at the ice house, answering the telephone and taking orders there.
So that's how people got ice. You had to deliver it.
I didn't deliver. Other people did. Someone else did. Yeah, we had. All I did was take orders there and wait on the customers that came.
So you said you worked at the drugstore, the pharmacy, for 2 years?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
What was your job there?
Well, mostly waiting at the fountain.
You were a soda jerk?
Soda jerk. I was a soda jerk, and I mixed the syrups that were used to make, and did some work around the store, waiting on someone come in that, aspirins and whatever people bought in the drugstore.
Okay, so here you are, 20 years old, a soda jerk, then 1942 rolls around. What made you decide to get into the Navy?
Well, of course, the Sunday of December the 7th, 1941, and I was going with a nice young lady, and she had been to church, and I had worked late that night and had gone to church. She came and picked me up, and we went to her parents for lunch. And of course, about 12 o'clock, the telephone rings, and they say, "Do you have the radio on?" No. Well, turn it on, because Pearl Harbor has been bombed. And of course, and all we do, for the next hour is just listen to the radio, and then Roosevelt came on and made a little speech, and then in February, I enlisted in the Navy, and because of my eyesight, I did not pass. You had to be 20/20 at that time, but in July, they changed the rules and regulations on eye requirements, so I went to Des Moines and enlisted in the Navy, and 1st of July and the 17th, I left Mount Ayr and went to Great Lakes and went through boot camp.
Real quick, back on that day in 1941, what were you thinking as you were listening to the radio?
Probably that the Japanese were not very nice people, and that they were cowards to make the attack like they did, and that, we're going to be in war and we're all going to go.
Did you understand it at your age? what that meant?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, yeah. We were, I think, our generation, of course, we were a little more knowledgeable or prepared for this. As you know, we grew up in large families, and we were used to doing as we were told. And in small schools like Mount Air, we were fortunate enough to play football, basketball, and baseball if we so desired. And we did as the coaches told us, and as the teachers also.
So the military lifestyle suited you?
I loved it, and I would recommend it for anybody, and I would vote for universal military training today. I don't know just how you would arrange it, but that's for somebody smarter than I am to do this. Just 6 months maybe of military training, and the rest is some type of education, because as you know, as we in Iowa have pretty well educated, but some of the other city kids don't get as much as they should have.
Well, why did you decide on the Navy?
I have no idea. I just decided I was going to go someplace. And Iowa has always had lots of Navy people, and I suppose growing up and see somebody come home in a Navy uniform or something, or Army uniform or whatever, but I have no idea why I joined the Navy. I was just going to enlist and go, and so I...
What job did they give you?
Well, of course, you go there and you go through boot camp, and you take tests also as you go along, and I have no idea why I went to medical school, corps school, whether it's because I worked in a drugstore or my aptitude test that I took didn't qualify me for anything else. But anyway, then after boot camp, and I came home for 11 days and went back and went to corps school for 6 weeks, and then from there I went to Brooklyn, New York, and Brooklyn Naval Hospital. Little did I know I wouldn't be home for 35 months when I left here in July of 1942.
What kind of things did they teach you at corpsman school?
Well, let's see. Anatomy and physiology and how I'd have to get my book out to
But just medical type
just
things?
medical, yeah, whatever, yeah.
Did they do training on like triage and what to do in case of emergencies, that kind of thing? How to save a life?
No, we did not have any of that type of thing. We just went to different classes and had lectures and took tests and
Did you enjoy learning about the medical world?
I really enjoyed all aspects of the Navy. So some of it was more difficult. The IQ is not as high on some things as it is on others, and yeah.
Well, tell me about when you shipped out. How did that go? What was that like?
Well, I went to Brooklyn, of course, and was there for a year, and then got on a train and went to Port Hueneme, California. And we shipped out, got aboard ship and a troop ship. I was land-based. I've been doing duty with dismounted cavalry, 40 CBs, and part of the time we had some Marines. Shipping out was I think a lot different for different people. Some of the men cried that, you know, they'd never get to see their parents again. I really was not, it didn't bother me this much. I knew I was going to come home. We went south and crossed the equator, and we went west and crossed the international date line, and we stopped at different islands on the way out. I'd have to look: Espiritu Santos, Fiji Islands, Russell Islands, Solomon Islands, Melanie Bay, New Guinea, and then the Admiralty Islands. I was fortunate. I was never seasick, and some of we of course wouldn't like. Now we fly. Then of course the troop transports were ships. When the ocean is calm, it's beautiful. I can see why people would get addicted to this and love it. I remember some evenings the merchant marine people, a couple of old white-haired men, would come up and sit on stools and just sit there and watch the ocean go by. The storms, of course, and nobody understands it. You think that the ship, of course, goes straight, but it doesn't. It goes weaves side by side and up and down and all around. And when we were in storms, why, it was rough. We put lines up to hold on to go where we were going. We did not know about this until later, and how it happened, someone came up missing at muster, so we had one boy that pushed overboard some way in a storm on the way out.
How long were you on that troop ship? 2 months.
I left in the first of the year. And then an interesting thing, we got to the Admiralty Islands where we were going, and we went in on the 29th day of February. And of course we went in, Melanie Bay was the last stop before we went on to the Admiralty Islands. And it was a big harbor. It was the biggest harbor in the Pacific besides Pearl Harbor and the harbor that was later in the Philippines.
What was your final destination on this ship?
Admiralty Islands, Los Negros and the Admiralties. And of course it's many islands. The island that I was on ended up on was 4 miles by 8 miles. The biggest island was 50 by 70 miles. And then there's little atolls and smaller islands around.
What was your job there on the island?
When I went to Brooklyn Naval Hospital, I did ward duty. Just general ward duty, and then one day I got sent to surgery, and I did surgery at Brooklyn Naval Hospital for 5 months, and then that's all I ever did. After that I did, well, I say 20 months of surgery, but it was actually 18 months of surgery. We set up originally where we set up on this island. was a tent, sand floor, Coleman lantern for light.
And that's where you did surgery?
And we did surgery. Yeah, and then...
Do you remember the name of the hospital? Did it have a name?
Acorn, the outfit that I was on was Acorn 24.
Okay.
That was, and I don't know. Some people thought it stood for Amphibious Construction Ordnance Repair Navy. That's Acorn. Mm-hmm. Someone else will say that, well, we were a land-based aircraft carrier.
Okay. What unit? Do you remember your unit name?
Acorn 24.
Okay, that's so.
And I was all in the beginning. I was in a Cashew 66, but I really don't know what that was. But then I ended up in Acorn 24.
Okay. So you said that the island was fairly small.
Yes, 4 miles by 8 miles.
What would you do with yourself when you were not in surgery?
In the beginning, of course, as the Japanese were removed from the islands and chased to another island, I was busy a lot of the time because of being in surgery. Mm-hmm. But we went out in the jungle and looked for souvenirs and things like that. Swimming was easy, and picked up seashells. And then, of course, the longer you're there, and the ingenuity of American people is just outstanding. And we played softball and basketball and watched people box and shot a few craps, played a little poker, drank a little beer. We got, in the beginning, of course, we were on K rations. And then we're on 10 and 1s, which is, the Army calls it something else, the Navy called it 10 and 1s, which is a group meal.
Did you ever get hot food from like a mess tent or anything?
After a while, then after we were there, probably 6 weeks maybe, then they set up cook shacks, and the Army got, they were having hot food before we did. And why I was given this duty, I don't know, but anyway, they sent me to the Army tent to give salt tablets and Ativan tablets, which was to stop malaria.
What was the salt tablets for?
Because it was 100 degrees and it was hot, and to make you sweat or whatever, to keep salt in your body after you lost moisture from your body.
So it prevented dehydration?
Prevented dehydration, right,
okay.
Yeah. And anyway, and because these guys come through the line to eat, and they have loaded carbines and whatever other guns that they were carrying, and if they didn't want to take those tablets, why, that was their affair. 'Cause I gave them the tablets, and they'd tell me where I could put it, and I'd say, well, it's on the ground. But anyway, and of course they got malaria too because they didn't take Ativan tablets. So. And then after a while, they built Quonset huts, and we set up in surgery in the Quonset huts, and we had, in the beginning, of course, the wards that we had were tents. wood ground floor, of course, you know, there's no.
What about critters? Snakes, spiders?
We lived with a little lizard, and about 4 inches long, and they changed color, and they were beautiful little things, but we had mosquito nets, of course, on our sacks. That's your bed. And those things, we lived 4 in a tent, and they were in our tents all the way. There were some snakes around. Not too many birds. I don't believe we had, no.
Did you always have to make sure to dump your boot out before you put your foot in case there was a snake in there? Or?
No. We never had that problem.
So you said that you shared the island with other units, like Army units. How many groups were there on that one island?
Well, of course, the dismounted cavalry made the invasion from the south end of the island, and we went in on the north end of this island. We went in to the bay or to the harbor, and they came in, and then there was the 40th Seabees, which were a well-known group in that day, and they were great. They could do anything, and they repaired the airstrip that we'd bombed, and then of course the Japanese, it was a very small air base, and Seabees make it bigger. And then after a while they built another air base. We actually had 2 on this island. One was built after we got there for them. And of course there's B-17s and B-24s that took off every morning and came back every evening, and fighter planes. And the one of the things that was kind of interesting, we had Aussies, that Australian pilots, and they were hot rods, and a P-40 was a double wing plane, and they'd go down, and you could see all over, but they'd go down the end of the strip and just drop the tail and go straight up, and
You got to watch that kind of stuff?
When we were close enough to see them.
What kind of patients would you see at the hospital?
In the beginning, we were taking care of the wounded and casualty type patients that somebody brought in, and we did what we. I've done everything but cut. I've held sutures, and I've given anesthetic. I gave gas and procaine, held retractors, sutured myself. But I never cut with a knife, but I did everything else. And then, of course, as the next islands, then of course they went to Tinian and Saipan and Palau and on to the Philippines, and we become rear echelon. And then our type of surgery that we did, like, well, of course, it's broken arms and broken legs and appendicitis and hernia, and we did some eye, just general surgery after the last X number of months that we were there.
So things slowed down as the war progressed towards Japan.
Yes, when we were after our harbor, Seidler Harbor, was the biggest harbor in the Pacific besides Pearl Harbor and the harbor in the Philippines, and this was a jumping off place then. We had tons and tons of ships in the harbor. Until after the Philippines were taken, and then after that, why, we were so far behind. Instead of, they went like from the Hawaiian Islands or from the United States, they went to the Philippines instead of that far south. We were south of the equator, so.
Did you ever have, like, get mail or care packages from home?
Well, the only way to correspond in those days was writing letters. So we wrote many letters, and my mother had 3 boys and 4 boys, 3 besides me. And my sisters wrote as long as my mother, and we corresponded with Army boys that we went to school with or was friends with at home. So we had lots of correspondence. Some of it might be 2-3 months late, which didn't make any difference. And of course we listened to Tokyo Rose. I don't know whether you have ever heard her name, but in the beginning, and somebody always had radio, and they knew who was on what outfits were on the island immediately. How they know, who knows? But but they did. They had V-mail, which they took a picture of. You wrote a letter and took it to your officer to be censored. Then they took a picture of this and sent it on. Then the care packages, of course, were shared, and if you got the one time at Christmas time, my mother sent a bowl this big around and a tin can full of popcorn. And things like that don't last long. You just share. And cookies, of course, if someone like a mother that sent cookies and they were crumbs, but the crumbs didn't go to waste. So, yeah. Just amazing. But the GI share. I mean, especially with the people who were in your tent or were in your organization or whatever. Oh yeah.
We're still doing pretty good. You had mentioned that you had some brothers that were also in the service?
I had a brother in the Navy, and he was in both the Atlantic and the Pacific. Was in combat, was in both areas. And I was in combat in the Pacific. I was with him. When I say I was with him, he was one place and I was another in New York, but he was there for 3 months. And I saw him most weekends and a lot of Wednesday nights. And then when I went to the West Coast, he was waiting on a ship in San Pedro, and he was in Los Angeles. I was at Port Hueneme, which is 60 miles north of Los Angeles, and I saw him every weekend then for a month. The last month I was supposed to have duty, but I knew we were leaving. I went to see him, and I did 36 hours extra duty, but it was worth it, except it kept me from getting rates as fast as I would have otherwise. I was in surgery in Brooklyn Naval Hospital, and one morning about 8 o'clock, the bank of phones along the wall, and somebody says, "Dailey, you wanted on the phone." So I went there, and this guy tells me he is Captain so-and-so, and do you know Marion J. Dailey? And I said, "Yes, that's my brother." And he said, "Well, he's at Pier 88 in New York, and if you want to come see him, you can come, and I'll meet you to give you permission to go on the pier and get on the ship." So then I saw him. He was on an LST landing ship tank, which he rowed across the Atlantic, which is a small ship, and they got full of men and tanks, and it was rough riding. They did stop in Puerto Rico, and then he was in North Africa with Patton, Sicily, Italy, and was wounded in southern France, lost both legs on a tank in southern France. I just happened to be in the invasion of Italy. I was in a movie theater watching the news, Pathfinder, I can't think what it was called right now, that they had before every movie, and his ship was bombed and blew up in Italy. And of course, I think the number of the ship was 306. And when I see that, but then when I ride him, and but he was ashore when this happened. Then my youngest brother was also in the Army, and he was in Georgia and came up to New York one weekend, and we spent the weekend together. So I've always felt I was kind of fortunate in many ways, and of course but I was always looking for somebody from home. I think that's a general statement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, especially just somebody from Iowa.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That show that you were talking about that airs before the movie, was it called The Big Picture?
No.
No? I was trying to think of what it was called too. Anyway, it's not important, but no. So you got to see your brothers periodically during your service? Yes,
ma'am. Well, then when I came back from the South Pacific in July, I was home in August, and then my brother, who was wounded, lost his legs in the tank, was in Mount Air with my parents and his wife. They lived in Humboldt, Iowa, northern Iowa, but he was here, and he stayed there. Then I was with him for the month that I was home, and then a week later, my youngest brother came from Europe. He was in 5 major engagements, and so we were home together with him for 3 weeks. The GIs celebrate a little when they come home, so we went dancing and whatever goes with that, for drinking, yes, and of course at that time, you see, you didn't buy adult beverages at a bar. You bought your own bottle and then mix it with 7-Up or Coke or whatever you mix it with. So, and then of course when I leave to get on the train, and I know that we're going to invade Japan. And I know because in the medical corps, that I'm going to be there. And of course, my younger brother, the smart kids that we all, we see in Tokyo. I was quite concerned when I got on that train to go to California. I was not nearly as confident as I was when I first time I was out in the South Pacific. You don't have to be too smart to know that there's going to be 2 million GIs in the invasion of Japan. They're going to fight like hell. I mean, look what happened at Iwo Jima and those other islands. And the closer you get to Japan, you can't blame the people. They're going to do everything they can to protect their land, just like we would do it here. So I know that I'm going to be someplace in the invasion. But anyway, the 2 bombs were dropped, and I was on a train in Arizona, headed for San Diego, California, when the war was over, which of course makes, we were very happy. So we killed more women, children. The atomic bombs was a godsend, both for the Japanese people as well as for a ton of GIs, because it ended the war. And they'd have never surrendered. We would have had to invade the island and take it. You're going to meet everything that you meet there is going to be bad, because they're going to fight you with sticks and stones and to protect their land, which we don't blame them for. So anyway, and the B-29, of course, which was the biggest plane there, and they got in War II, and they was made to fly long distance to drop these bombs. We burned up more people with Napa bombs and big bombs, because the Japan was made up of wooden buildings. Tokyo was in those days, and God, you just dropped it. It's not a good deal. But then Pearl Harbor wasn't a good deal either. So.
Did you have any involvement in the service after the bombs dropped and after the war? Did you go back to service, or were you done?
I enlisted for the duration in 6 months. You had points for being every month that you were in, every month that you were overseas, X number of points for being in combat. So when the war was over, I had enough points to get out. But I was in the medical corps. The medical corps were frozen. They were not so. Then I stayed in until the last day of December. So I actually did the duration plus 5 months plus X number of days. So I was close to my duration and my enlistment. And then, of course, I got in the reserves, and when I went back up the Great Lakes down the Korean War, rode a train back and forth every week to see a wife and 2 kids in Mount Air. So anyway.
So when did you get married?
In 40, I came home in 46 from California, of course. I got discharged in California. And then came back to Mount Air, and I got married in 47. And I ran for Ringold County Recorder and was elected, and so then I stayed here.
So you also served during Korea.
I went to Great Lakes doing the Korean thing.
Okay.
And as any military people know, during World War II, of course, officers intimidated me somewhat. But at Great Lakes, nobody did. little older, and it was more relaxing. Mm-hmm. And I had great duty there. I had a great officer. I did duty with two people there at the opposite end of the spectrum in intelligence. I was E6, which is first class. In the War II, I was a pharmacist made first class, but then they changed those things. When I go back to Great Lakes, I'm a hospital corpsman, first class. The two people that I did duty with had both been in about 12 years. If I'd have stayed in, that's about what I would have been in. And the one guy was still first class, which is what I was. The other guy was an ensign. Went in as an enlisted man and to going to school and doing what the hell he was. He had made ensigns, so you know how intelligent he was and what a great person he was. And the other guy, because his idea was to give the reserves a bad time, and which didn't work.
Yeah. So you were at the Great Lakes for
13 months for the Korean. While I was I finished up my reserve time, and yeah.
All right. So when did you get out of the service altogether?
In May of '52, I got paid for 8 years, and I got credit for more than 8 years as far as reserve time and active time.
Okay. So how do you feel now, looking back on your service? How do you feel about how you were able to serve?
I'm not any better than anybody else that was ever put a uniform on. In my thinking, I think because I enlisted, I was happier and got along better than a lot of people who thought they were forced in or drafted or whatever. So that's the way I feel, that this is part of the reason. And I did. You make E6 in 3 years is doing pretty well, which you know this, even in wartime, because many people were in that stayed corporals or privates or seamen or what the hell ever. So I enjoyed my Navy time.
You think you would do it all again?
I would do it all again, and I would recommend for people that, and I didn't get out because I disliked the Navy. I mean, I had a good duty and I had a good time. I had medical officers, which were not like line officers. I mean, they were professional people, and so oh yes, yeah, I'd do it again. Yeah. There's 16 million men and women in World War II. So all the GI stories that you hear, that your father tells you, your uncles or who the aunts or who the hell ever, they're all true. Everything happened. You get that many people in there, and young. I mean, you know, God, most of us see were 18 to 25. I mean, there were people that were older than this that were, you know, that we were all young and full of vinegar and whatever else that goes with it. So, yeah, it was.
I think that's about it. Do you have anything else that you wanted to talk about?
No, I'm fine. I think we covered everything. If you're done, I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you for doing this.